To the point, informative, entertaining, and protecting the Second Amendment, welcome back to Elfster's Rifles and Reloading, and the review of the Lyman case dryer and other methods of drying wet brass. Enough said, let's get this going.
One hour later.
So I've been checking this periodically, and this is with 100 pieces of 223 and 50 pieces of 7.62 brass. And you know, I initially set this at 2 hours. It's been a little over an hour, and last time I checked this about 2-3 minutes ago, they are bone dry. You know, a good way to check is to take a piece of brass, go like this onto your palm. If you see any water spots or water beads on your palm, obviously it's not dry, but these are bone dry a little after an hour, so that is pretty darn awesome, especially if you want to keep on going in the reloading process. It really is hard to beat this. And you know, you can use different levels of trays depending on if you're drying multiple cartridges at one time, or obviously a tremendous amount of brass. This is my opinion, definitely the way to go. And you know, these pieces of brass, they're not really hot. I mean, they're warm, but you know, they're not scalding hot to the point where you can't hold them in your hand. And so far, I'm really impressed. So I don't see any point to keep this going here. You can push this forward and shut it off. And I'm gonna empty these trays. And this is for the 7.62. Now, also what I like about this case dryer, you know, some of these other dehydrators I've seen guys use, the actual dehydrating heat element is on the top. And what I really like about this is the heat element is at the bottom. And you know, the almost like a convection air system that if you're not moving that air, you're not going to dry that brass as fast. And this has somewhat of a trough down here to catch any water, so that's a really good designing engineer aspect of the Lyman case dryer. And the fact that the heat element is at the bottom, in my opinion, that was a smart move on Lyman's part. Some other features I like about this Cyclone case dryer, I like the fact that it has square pans, and also it has a very small footprint. I mean, we are only talking, what, about a little over 9 inches by 12 inches. So it's a really small footprint. You know, just to give you an example of my LEM dehydrator, you know, this is not really a commercial grade dehydrator. I'd say it's a pretty standard dehydrator. I actually use this a lot for my jerky. You know, and this thing is 16.5 inches by 19 inches. And this has a very small footprint, which is perfect for your reloading room. It's not sucking up too much space. So for the budget minded, I don't see why you just couldn't go to Walmart and get a standard dehydrator. If you do that, I would just make sure it has a timer. I think that's really important if you're going to be using a dehydrator for drying your brass. But you know, I've looked for them before, a decent dehydrator that has a timer. You know, you're going to be spending at least, I would say, $40 minimum. And I think right now, let me check on the screen here, with the Lyman Cyclone dryer on Amazon, you can get this shipped for $65.88, so roughly $66 shipped. And just to go over those features again, as a dedicated dehydrator for drying your brass, I think it's really important. You know, the square trays, the heating elements on the bottom, it's not on the top. You're not fighting that heating element. These trays are really lightweight, and having that heating element on the bottom, obviously heat rises, plus it pushes that air out, gets that air moving, and it also has that trough on the bottom for collecting any extra water if you don't use the hammock method like I shown you guys previously. So I think for roughly $66 to have a dedicated dehydrator in this situation, it's 100% worth it. So just to show you the manual, you know, they do mention that it will hold up to 1,000 pieces of 223 and 2,000 pieces of 9mm. And for such a small footprint, roughly 10 inches by 12 inches, that is pretty darn impressive. You know, they say it has a 3-hour timer. You know, in this example, for the 100 pieces of 5.56 and 50 pieces of 7.62, really I only needed about an hour. So that is also impressive. I know some of you guys like to use an ultrasonic cleaner for cleaning gun parts. So obviously they're mentioning here that you can use this for drying off your gun parts also. And they are also mentioning here the average dry time for 1,000 pieces of 5.56 is roughly 60 to 90 minutes. So I really don't see how you guys can go wrong with this case dryer. As a dedicated dehydrator with all those amazing features, it really is the way to go in my opinion. So I really think that this is a solid product, and for your average reloading session for rifle necked brass ammunition, it's only going to take about 45 minutes to an hour to get that brass dry. You know, if you're doing big batches like 1,000 pieces of 5.56, it could take roughly 2 hours, but I don't see it taking any longer than that. Now, where this thing is really going to shine is for your pistol ammunition reloaders. You know, usually you're not popping out that primer until you're up to the point of progressively reloading it. And because you're not popping out that primer, if you're just going to let it sit out your bench and air dry, it's going to take well over a week to make sure that those primer pockets are bone dry. And you always want to pop out one of those primers to make sure that they're bone dry before you reload that pistol ammunition. And that's where the Cyclone dryer is really going to shine, is for your pistol reloaders. Now, some other methods that you can do if you want to dry off your brass, if you don't want to go this method, is obviously do the method that I did in the past, is with compressed air, with an air compressor. Just blow off that brass as best as you can and let it sit on your bench. Typically, I'd have to let it sit on my bench overnight for roughly 12 hours before I can proceed with my reloading session. Another method I've seen people use, and I've personally never done it, but I've seen guys use buckets of alcohol where they'll submerge the brass into the alcohol and pull it back out and that alcohol will evaporate, and that brass is usually bone dry. The problem I have with that, and I guess the reason why I've never done it before, is obviously you're using very flammable products in your reloading room, and obviously that alcohol is going to get diluted over a period of time, and then you got to screw around with redistilling it or buying new alcohol. And I think at that point, if I had to screw all that, I think I would just invest the $66 and get this Cyclone case dryer. Now, some other things I've actually done before in the past. I've tried it. I tried a toaster oven. The problem is with this, you don't get much square footage out of it. There's only one or two trays. You don't get the square footage out of, for example, like this Cyclone dryer. You're getting almost 4 square feet out of this. 1,000 pieces of 223 dried in less than 1 to 2 hours. I think that's pretty impressive. I've also heard of guys using just a standard, kitchen oven. They get a cookie sheet and they'll set that oven at roughly 150 to 200 degrees, and they'll have it in there for roughly an hour or two. I guess I've heard of guys talking about case hardening with that method. I've never personally done it. But I think at that point, I would just invest the $66 for, something like this Cyclone dryer, or just get a standard dehydrator. As long as the heat element was on the bottom and not the top, so I don't have to screw around with that. I think that would be definitely the way to go. And one last method I've heard of guys doing is using I think it's a sweater rack or something like that. You put it in your actual clothes dryer. I've heard of guys doing that before. I suppose you could do that. More times than not, you're probably gonna piss off your wife. But I've never done it, but I've heard of guys doing it. But once again, I think if you had to go to that point, that extremity of using your actual clothes dryer, just get a dehydrator. It's definitely the way to go, in my opinion. So. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little review of the Lyman Cyclone case dryer, and it is definitely going to be my preferred method of drying brass. Using that towel with the hammock method to get as much water as you possibly can off that brass, just like that, and then throw it in this Cyclone dryer, and you're done in less than an hour. If you guys enjoy my content, please scratch my back, and I'll keep on scratching yours by subscribing and sharing my videos. If you could jump on my Patreon account, I really appreciate that, or jump on my Facebook account and check out those amazing deals. And I'll see you guys in the next video.